This is ABC7 News at 5:30. Your Suncoast News. We're here for you.
Welcome back. Tonight, Sarasota residents will find out who will be representing them on the City Commission.
There are 3 candidates going after 2 seats. There's been a steady flow of voters throughout the day at Sarasota's 18 polling places. ABC7's Rick Adams is joining us now live from the Supervisor of Elections office in Sarasota with the latest. Rick.
Yeah, Haley and Scott, the polls will be closing in about an hour and a half, and that's at 7 o'clock tonight. So you still have a little bit of time to get out and vote. And we're being told voting is up compared to the election 2 months ago. There are 3 Sarasota City Commissioner candidates going after the 2 available at-large seats. They are Jennifer A. Horn-Koch, Hagen Brody, and Martin Hyde. The trio beat out 5 other candidates back in the election on March 14th. Earning the right to be part of today's runoff election. Sarasota's Supervisor of Elections says they should have the final results at a pretty reasonable hour tonight.
At 7 o'clock this evening, our vote by mail results and early voting results will be released at that time. And then we'll start to, after 7 o'clock, we'll start to get results in from the precincts around the city of Sarasota.
And we're being told the results could be in as early as 8 o'clock or even before 8 o'clock. Make sure you keep it here for all the latest. Reporting live from Sarasota, I'm Rick Adams. Back to you.
All right, Rick, thank you so much. Now, in Northport, voters are going to the polls to cast their ballots for either Pete Emmerich or Jill Luke.
Both candidates are running for seat 4 on the City Commission. ABC7's Christopher Brantley is joining us now live from Northport with how the election is going so far. Christopher.
Good evening, Scott and Haley, and welcome to Northport City Hall, where there is a vacancy. Seat 4 opened up on Election Day last November, when its now former occupant, Mayor Jacqueline Moore, resigned from that seat to run for another seat. And she lost. And because of that vacancy, Northport is holding this special election today. And according to the Supervisor of Elections office, there is a higher turnout here in Northport for this election today than March's primary election. And we did speak a short while ago to both candidates about how they're feeling just hours from the polls closing.
I feel great about today. Win, lose, or draw, we've put forth our best effort, and we're hoping for the best. And I think we're going to win.
I've done nothing but pour myself into the issues and preparing for this position. So I'm ready to work immediately as soon as they say yay.
Now, whoever wins tonight is only going to serve out the remainder of Seat 4's term, which is about 16 months or so. Both candidates are planning on holding watch parties, waiting to see who the voters will send here to City Hall. Live in Northport, Christopher Brantley, ABC7, your Suncoast News.
Thank you, Christopher. And you do still have time to cast your ballot. The polls close at 7 o'clock. As soon as the results are in, we will bring them to you live on ABC7 News at 7. We will also have updates on our website, mysuncoast.com, as well as our Facebook and Twitter accounts. Also, remember, you can get up-to-the-minute election news 24 hours a day by downloading our My Suncoast app. You'll get important news updates, weather forecasts, and traffic updates. You can get these delivered right to the palm of your hand.
Time now to get a check on our weather again with Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan. Another dry and unhealthy air in the area today, right?
Yeah, we have a high ozone level of 122. That's unhealthy for sensitive folks who have respiratory illnesses. That is a problem for the regular folks that don't have problems like that. You should not experience any kind of difficulties breathing. But I think it'll be back again tomorrow because things aren't changing much. It's 83 degrees right now. We have the sunshine. The west wind at 12 actually causes that ozone to come on shore as that happens. And the pressure now 30.02 inches, and that is fairly high, holding steady. Winds are out of the west, and they're starting to get a little bit further inland now, but earlier it was just near the coast within a few miles, so temperatures there into the low to mid 80s, but inland areas were at 90 just about an hour ago into Northport. Right now it's 83 in Sarasota. 91 though still at Mayaca City. You can see the leading edge of that sea breeze front has made its way in through Northport. They cooled a few degrees just within the last half hour. It's 88 now in Port Charlotte. Bradenton, you're at 84 degrees, 86 at Lakewood Ranch, and Siesta Key, a comfortable 81. More on your weather forecast in just a few minutes. Back to you.
Thank you, Bob. Residents and business owners in Bradenton Beach packed City Hall today.
all to discuss an issue that has escalated in the past 5 months and even led to an arrest. ABC7's Dwayne Lindo attended the workshop and has more details for us tonight. Dwayne.
Well, Haley, business owners are crying foul due to the city's noise ordinance, which they say is hurting their business year-round. They say it's just too low, but residents living close to the downtown area say this music is just simply keeping them up.
And it's changed, but
during Tuesday afternoon's Bradenton Beach City Commission workshop, all involved were in agreement on one thing.
The whole ambience of Bradenton Beach and Bridge Street has changed.
But according to Barbara Hugg, who has lived in Bradenton Beach for more than a decade, it has changed for the worse. She says her and many of her neighbors are constantly rattled with local bars exceeding the decibel levels.
And right now, when they play, especially on Sunday nights, you can sit at the bay on the other side, and the music is so loud.
It was only recently that noise concerns in the city have escalated. Live entertainment at the Freckled Fin restaurant located downtown resulted in numerous complaints from residents since the beginning of this year. One complaint even leading to the misdemeanor arrest of the restaurant's owner, Scott Labor, an arrest unprecedented for the city. Lubor pleaded to the commission about what he calls an absurdity, a maximum 75 decibel level ordinance from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m.
And if you turn a speaker on, you're going to be over 75 decibels.
Lubor stressing that traffic noises and other venues downtown is contributing to the high decibel levels. One resident who attended the meeting says she's all for following the rules, but decibel levels must be measured properly.
Tourism is our #1 industry here, and while this still is a fairly sleepy island compared to, say, South Beach, we do like to kick up our heels and have a good time.
And her husband, who is a musician on the island, would be affected as well.
If the music ordinance gets, if the noise ordinance gets too tight, he's not going to have anywhere to play music, and that is what keeps food on our table.
The commission meeting lasted 3 hours with public comment added, of course. And with that, the commissioners agreed there's no easy answers for solving this problem and decided they will have another workshop for further discussion. Back to you.
Thank you, Dwayne. The White House is on the defensive today on questions about Russia, diffusing questions about how long it took the White House to act on a warning by the former acting attorney general. The president tweeted the story of collusion is, quote, a total hoax. But on several other fronts, warnings about Russian interference continue to mount. ABC's Lana Zach is following these developments in Washington.
The investigations into Russian interference are heating up, but the White House says again the president has no ties to Russia.
He has no business in Russia. He has no connections to Russia.
Following the testimony of former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, the White House is defending the 18 days that Michael Flynn was allowed to continue to serve as national security advisor.
They informed the president right away after they were informed of her giving us a heads up. And ultimately, the president made the right decision.
Though Spicer declined to say what Flynn did during those 18 days.
I'm not going to get back into it.
Meanwhile, ABC News' Pierre Thomas has exclusively learned that FBI counterintelligence agents are investigating antivirus software from Kaspersky Lab, a Russian cybersecurity firm. They fear Russian intelligence services could potentially try to use it as a hidden gateway to spy on Americans or attack critical U.S. infrastructure. The company has repeatedly insisted its widely used software poses no threat to U.S. consumers and that it would never allow itself to be used as a government tool. And it seems Russia is more than just a U.S. problem. Back at the Senate, the director of the National Security Agency testified about what he told French officials about Russian interference into their elections.
look, we're watching the Russians. We're seeing them penetrate some of your infrastructure.
And during the same press briefing in which Sean Spicer said the president didn't want to, quote, smear a good man when it came to Mike Flynn, Spicer also cast aspersions on Sally Yates, pointing specifically to rumors and her refusal to uphold the president's travel ban later. Lana Zach, ABC News, Washington.
The Trump administration is now considering sending more U.S. troops to Afghanistan. The Pentagon putting together proposals for a slight increase in the U.S. troop presence there, an additional 1,000 to 3,000 service members. The president's national security advisor says ISIS and the Taliban have redoubled their efforts and it's now time for the U.S. and Afghan partners to respond to that. There are currently 8,400 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. More than 2,000 are involved in counterterrorism against ISIS and al-Qaeda. But the rest are part of a NATO mission to train, advise, and assist Afghan forces.
A former Tennessee teacher charged with kidnapping a student is now in a Kentucky jail. Tad Cummins was arrested last month after a nationwide manhunt to find him and his former student, 15-year-old Elizabeth Thomas. Authorities say Cummins took the teen across 9 states before being captured in a remote California cabin. The teen's father says Cummins brainwashed his daughter, but Cummins' attorney says she went with her teacher willingly.
Sometimes she'll be happy and laughing and back to the same old girl, and then she'll be sometimes just in a fetal position crying. It's been a roller coaster for her.
A court document shows that Cummins' original plan was to take the victim south of the border to Mexico and beyond.
A Massachusetts judge has agreed to erase Aaron Hernandez's murder conviction because he died before his appeal could be heard. The judge ruling a legal doctrine calls for vacating convictions when a defendant dies before that appeal can be heard, and it was a binding precedent. The former New England Patriots tight end hanged himself in his prison cell last month while serving a life sentence in the murder of semi-professional football player Odin Lloyd. Still to come tonight in your Suncoast News, a disease nearly all but gone in the United States has reared its head once again.
A recent outbreak of measles is worrying parents. How you can protect your children straight ahead.
For your plumbing, electrical, or air conditioning, and services is qualified, and service calls are free. And services.com, AND services.com.
You only have one life. Are you gambling with it? 1 in 3 adults have high blood pressure. Not knowing your numbers could cause you to lose, big time. Luckily, you can turn the odds in your favor by getting your blood pressure checked today. Don't leave your health to chance. Learn more at heart.org/HPV.
Is your old garage door stuck or broken? Would a new one give you a lift? Let Precision Door Overhead Garage Door Service of Sarasota come to the rescue with prompt and affordable repair service. Replacement doors come with an array of styles and colors, and they are rated to meet and exceed Florida standards. From estimates to installation, your satisfaction is our priority. If you're not 100% satisfied with any product, service, or installation, we will make it right, because Precision Door Service is a name you can trust.
The official salon of ABC7. Cutting loose salon.
Need more space in your place? The More Space Place can help with Murphy beds that disappear to reveal a home office, living room, or den. Custom closets with designated areas for your shoes, bags, wardrobe, and accessories. Custom-built entertainment centers, garage storage systems, and more. The More Space Place has 3 showrooms next to Sonny's on US 41 South in Sarasota, on Lakewood Ranch Boulevard just south of State Route 64 in Bradenton, and on Tamiami Trail next to Panera Bread in Port Charlotte. Put more space in your place at the More Space Place.
They're coming from Tampa, Fort Myers, even Orlando. They're coming from everywhere for the Sarasota Ford Promise. Our promise means a new car you'll love. If not, return it for one you do. At Sarasota Ford, we promise live market pricing. We monitor national pricing on our entire inventory, so you get the best deal. In fact, we guarantee it. Bring us any competitor's ad and we'll beat it by at least $1,000. That's why they're coming from everywhere to Sarasota Ford, where 41 meets 301. SarasotaFord.com.
For your plumbing, electrical, or air conditioning, and services is qualified, and service calls are free. And services.com, AND services.com.
Health officials are sounding the alarm after a recent outbreak of measles in Minnesota. More than 40 children there have been sickened in recent weeks. Officials say they were never vaccinated. ABC News senior medical contributor Dr. Timothy Johnson has more on a warning for all parents.
Measles should be a preventable, deadly disease, a disease of the past. So how come it appears in modern Minnesota? This outbreak is the latest episode in the resurgence of diseases once nearly vanquished in the U.S. The problem is that too many kids are not getting the recommended vaccinations, an anomaly in the U.S. where vaccination rates are as high as 90% for many childhood diseases. And yet, these pockets of under-vaccination are growing. The cause is the fear of vaccines, often due to misinformation about safety. Though the scientific community has repeatedly debunked these fears, worries over possible medical consequences have sent vaccination rates plummeting in some areas, down to critical levels that allow diseases like measles, mumps, or whooping cough to gain a foothold. Fortunately, it's a problem that parents can solve. It's as simple and inexpensive as making sure your kids get their shots. Key vaccinations, the MMR, tetanus, polio, chickenpox, all protect kids from preventable illness and the elderly and infants from their deadly consequences. Just a few shots that could make a difference for your child and your community. With this Medical Minute, I'm Dr. Timothy Johnson.
Well, here we go. We got the weather forecast for you right now. We're looking at generally fair skies right now. Okay, I'll send it back to Haley.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to go to a special report with ABC News.
Press Secretary today, just a few hours ago at his briefing, if the president still had confidence in James Comey, and I was struck by the response. He did not answer yes. He said that he knew of nothing that had changed earlier statements that he had confidence, but that he would have to go and check with the president again. David, quite a stunning development here at the White House, and it comes after Comey has been under fire for the last 24 hours because it has been revealed that he gave misleading testimony, incorrect testimony.
He came out and said he was, in essence, reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton, and then 2 days before the election saying there was nothing there. Pierre Thomas, who covers the FBI, covered that story in great detail. And Pierre, again, a very controversial figure in Washington, making just about everyone in that town unhappy at one point.
Exactly, David. But I can tell you this comes as a shock, and it certainly came as a shock to Comey. He had just recently talked about wanting to complete his full term, which goes for another 7 years or so. He talked about all the great work that the FBI had been doing. He also, as you recall, David, had publicly disagreed with Trump, in which when Trump talked about the fact that the Obama administration had him under surveillance, Trump had made those statements. The FBI director came out in a hearing and said that was not true, publicly disagreeing with his boss, extremely unusual. So, again, there had been tension between the two men, but I can tell you, Director Comey was planning on staying on in this job.
And again, as I point out, Pierre, making Republicans unhappy and not pursuing any criminal charges against Hillary Clinton, infuriating millions who supported Hillary Clinton, and coming out with that investigation that turned up nothing 11 days before the campaign came to an end with Election Day. And John Carl, I want to get back to you for just a moment, because the other major complicating factor here is the fact that the FBI is, in fact, right now investigating any possible collusion between members of the Trump campaign team and Russia, and now the head of the FBI has been fired.
Yes, and you remember the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, has recused himself from any involvement with cases involving Russia. So Comey was an especially critical figure in that investigation, along with the Deputy Attorney General. Now, I've also received, David, a letter from President Trump that has just been released explaining a little bit of his reasoning. He says that he accepted letters from both the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and he says, quote, "I have accepted their recommendation, and you are hereby terminated and removed from office effective immediately." This is a letter that I am told was just sent within the hour to FBI Director James Comey. He goes on to say, "While I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau." So as you pointed out, he has been under fire from Democrats, certainly from the Clinton campaign and people who were, associated with the Clinton campaign. But also, Donald Trump has expressed great frustration with Comey as well. Just last week, tweeting that Comey should have prosecuted Hillary Clinton in the email case.
I want to get back to what you just said there, John, that comment now issued by the White House and President Trump. You said that President Trump talked about conversations with James Comey and that Comey said to him on several occasions, you are not under investigation. And yet at the same time, we do know that the FBI, James Comey, did confirm that there is an ongoing investigation into people who were associated with the Trump campaign and any possible collusion with Russia. Obviously, we don't have the results of that investigation. Is that not correct?
That is right. That is certainly an investigation that is in its early stages, an investigation into what exactly the Russians were doing and whether or not there was any collusion on the part of any Trump associates. That is far from resolved. What was said, though, most recently at a hearing yesterday on Capitol Hill by James Clapper, the the former director of national intelligence, is that there is no evidence yet of collusion. There is no evidence, but this investigation is very much in its early stages. It is an FBI investigation that was being led by James Comey. It is also an investigation that is being separately done by the Senate Intelligence Committee and by the House Intelligence Committee. So we're far from the end of that investigation.
All right, John, stay tuned. I know you have much more on World News Tonight on this breaking headline. Let's get to Pierre for one last question. Pierre, the obvious question for so many people likely at home, who takes over the FBI next? We know that the FBI director is usually appointed for a 10-year term. James Comey had been appointed under President Obama, had served, I believe, about 3.5 years of that term. So what comes next?
Well, David, the president will obviously have to consult Congress to try to come up with a candidate that both sides of the aisle can deal with and would support. But again, just to emphasize what Jonathan just said, you had the FBI director engaging in an investigation of the White House in terms of looking at whether Trump associates colluded with the Russians in any way, shape, or fashion during the last presidential election. The fact that that man has now been fired will be a critical question, and we'll be hearing a lot from the Democrats, David.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary headline. I do want to get back to John, who has new reporting. And John, as you heard Pierre, we cannot underscore, in recent memory, an FBI director being fired who's actually investigating possible associates linked to the current president.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, David, I just got a letter. It's a lengthy letter, a 3-page letter from the Deputy Attorney General going chapter and verse as to why he was recommending that Comey be fired. Just going through this, one thing that immediately stands out is this sentence, David. The director was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority on July 5th, 2016, and to announce his conclusion that the case against Hillary Clinton and her emails would be closed without prosecution. It is not the function of the director to make such an announcement. You remember that was that highly dramatic press conference that was held last summer where FBI Director Comey was quite critical of Hillary Clinton and how she handled the emails, but announced that he did not have enough to prosecute and he was closing the case. So this says that that was wrong. He said, compounding the error, the director ignored another long-standing principle. We do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation. Very harsh words here directed from the Justice Department towards the FBI director. I also have here, David, a much shorter letter from the Attorney General, from Jeff Sessions, also with some pointed words about James Comey. Just listen to the end of this. The director of the FBI must be someone who follows faithfully the rules and principles of the Department of Justice and who sets the right example for our law enforcement officials and others in the department. Therefore, I must recommend to you, you remove Director James Comey. Remarkable statement. He is saying that effectively James Comey was not an appropriate role model for law enforcement in the country and did not reflect those ideals and those principles. That's from the Attorney General. Really, he's not only fired here, David, this is an indictment of his term and his actions during the course of the election.
John, we do have that video that happened shortly after Donald Trump was elected president, his meeting at the White House after the inauguration with James Comey. The joke in the room that you're the only one perhaps more famous than I am at this point, President Trump said to obviously the very tall James Comey, who's what, 6'7" or 6'8". But, John, I want to drill down on what you just reported there, because that July press conference was fairly unorthodox. It did break with precedent. James Comey coming before the public in holding a news conference, laying out a case, a scathing case against Hillary Clinton and her use of email, but then at the very end of the news conference saying he would not recommend criminal charges. Correct me if I'm wrong. What you have just reported is that the Trump administration has now taken the recommendation saying that was not right, that did not hold with precedent before him, that he should not have gone public, laying out the case, if you will, before the American people about Hillary Clinton. There's some irony here in that Donald Trump faced a very difficult battle against Hillary Clinton, and now it would seem the Trump White House has fired James Comey in part because of his decision to go public about Hillary Clinton.
That is exactly, there are 2 points here, David. He is criticizing him regarding that July 5th press conferences for 2 reasons. One, saying it was not his authority to come out and to announce that there would be no prosecution. That one, you can imagine Republicans applauding, because, you know, we've heard more recently from the president himself that he believes that Hillary Clinton should have been prosecuted. But on the other side, saying that in announcing that decision, that she wasn't going to be prosecuted, you don't lay out all this disparaging information. That is not the role of a prosecutor. If the prosecutor prosecutes, or he does not. Comey did, as described here, is he basically indicted her in the court of public opinion without saying that he was going to seek an actual indictment.
Yeah, John, you cover the campaign very closely, and many people on Clinton's team felt as though the damage had been done, whether he pressed for criminal charges or not at the end of that news conference, because of how scathing the words were in describing Hillary Clinton and some of her aides. I want to bring back in Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, on World News, you had interviewed James Comey, or had tried in the hallways there on Capitol Hill, by asking him simply, are you comfortable with the role you played or might have played in this election? You got nothing really more than a smile and acknowledgement in that hallway. But this is something James Comey will face for, you know, many years to come. What was his role, if any, by coming forward 11 days before the election?
And David, you recall just last week, the FBI director gave an impassioned testimony before congressional leaders, talking about the fact of why he took the action that he did. Now, a couple of points I would point out. Number one, the Justice Department Inspector General was doing an investigation looking at how Comey handled the Clinton situation. That was pending. Interesting that the new Deputy Attorney General has come in along with Attorney General Sessions and basically usurped that investigation and come to their own conclusions. The other thing is the backdrop of Comey's decision that he emphasized last week in terms of talking about Clinton publicly was that Loretta Lynch had gotten on board, the then Attorney General had gotten on board a plane and talked with former President Clinton about the investigation of Clinton. Comey was told by Loretta Lynch that he could make the decision along with career attorneys, and he said that's why he felt compelled to do so.
Right, made the decision, but in fact went public with it as well with that press conference, which is under fire now. Pierre, thanks to you and to John Carl. For many of you, your local 6 o'clock news is next. We'll have team coverage on World News Tonight. I'll see you then. Good night.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
We'll be, well, let's start our 6 o'clock news tonight. Witnesses giving insight into the efforts to a father and daughter. We'll have more on that story right after this.